Hey, Bill Watson here, and again, welcome to another Armor of God session on the web. You know, many years ago, far too many than I would like to admit now, I used to go out to this place up on Lake Erie in northern Ohio where I live, and I used to watch, when I was much younger, as I say, the sun setting, asking myself this question. And I don't know how many of you have ever asked yourself this question, but the question went along these lines. Why was I born? I mean, why am I living here in the United States? Why not somewhere in South America or on the Pacific Rim or up in the Himalaya Mountains, or how about Iceland? Why am I speaking English and not French or German? Why do I have my mom and my dad? Why not some other parents that were my parents? And why am I a white guy? Why not a black guy? You know, why am I the ethnicity that I am and not another ethnicity? And so I would ask myself a lot of these questions about why am I existing? And today I'd like to ask you, if you've never asked yourself this question, I'd like to pose it to you. Why were you created? Well, you know, believe it or not, a gentleman many, many years ago in your Bible had this same question. His name was Job. And the writer in the book of Hebrews nailed his question quite clearly. I'd like to share it with you over here in chapter 2 in the book of Hebrews. Let me bring your attention to verse 6. It says here, "But one in a certain place testified, saying, What is man, that you are mindful of him, or the Son of Man, that you visitest him? You madest him a little lower than the angels, you crowned him with glory and honor, and did set him over the works of your hands." Now, the Bible has a lot to say about why we were born, why we were created. As a matter of fact, the Bible has the truth regarding the destiny of humankind. And it begins right from the get-go. As a matter of fact, again, let me bring your attention over here to the book of Genesis, way back here in the beginning of the book of Genesis, chapter 1 of all things. And in verse 26, we read this, and let me share this with you. "And God said, Let us make man," he says here, "in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish in the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and the cattle, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing." He goes on, "that creeps upon the earth. So God," notice this, my friends, this is interesting stuff. I get pumped up when I read about this stuff because it goes right to the heart of why you're drawing breath, why you eat, and why you're living a life of existence and of conscious awareness. Notice this, verse and in 27, "So God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him, male and female, created them, and God blessed them. God said unto them, Be fruitful, multiply, replenish the earth, subdue it, have dominion over the fish, the sea, over the fowl of the air, over every living thing that moves upon the earth." What God is saying here is mankind, including the ladies, are the capstone. They were the capstone species of all the creation of humanity, and that He, God, gave mankind authority over all things. But you know what? This is just the beginning of this understanding of what man's destiny is. Do you know it goes beyond that? Oh yes, my friends, let me bring you back over here to Hebrews again, chapter 2, where we were at the outset, and let me share this with you again in regards to this continuing understanding about the destiny of why you and I, as human beings, were created. Here in verse 9, he says here, "You put or have put all things in subjection under His feet," mankind's feet. "For in that He put all in subjection under Him, He left nothing that is not put under Him. But now we see not yet all things." Do you get that? Mankind has had a certain amount of things put under him, but not yet all things. Meaning there's more to this story than just planet Earth. But that's to say this first. Notice, he says this in verse 9. We see Jesus first. This is what we see now. We see Jesus, who was made a little lower than the angels for his suffering of death, crowned with glory and honor, that he, by the grace of God, should taste death for every man, for it became him, for whom are all things, and by whom are all things, in bringing many sons to glory, to make the captain of their salvation perfect through sufferings. What he's saying here is Jesus comes first, and we, as human beings, find him, Christ, the captain of our salvation, of which through his sufferings we can access something greater than what we currently find our present condition as. Notice in dropping down here to verse 17, wherefore in all things it behooved him to be made like unto his brethren, this is talking about Christ, that he, Christ, might be merciful and a faithful high priest in things pertaining to God, that's God the Father, to make reconciliation for the sins of the people, for in that he himself suffered being tempted, he is able to secure them, that's you and me, who are tempted. So here we find Jesus Christ is able to secure you and I for something that is far greater and exceeds, goes beyond human existence. And it's further elaborated upon. It is further detailed in a conversation between a guy named Nicodemus and Jesus himself, where in John chapter 3, I'm not going to turn there, you can read it at your own leisure and convenience when you get a chance. Suffice it to say, it was quite a conversation. And Nicodemus, who was a Pharisee, a well-educated guy, as I've often said, he was no knucklehead. He knew exactly what Jesus was talking about when Jesus said, you know what, Nicodemus? You've got to be born again. Born again. And Nicodemus says, how can that be? How can I go back into my mom's womb? I'm a big guy. I'm a full-grown man. What are you talking about, Jesus? He knew exactly Jesus was talking about metabolic terminology. He was talking about biology. He wasn't talking about some kind of emotional, kind of mental, kind of a eureka experience. Oh, that's part of it, don't get me wrong. But in John 3, the topic goes beyond that, my friends. In John 3, Jesus is talking biology with Nicodemus. And Nicodemus was incredulous over understanding the fact that Jesus was saying, Nicodemus, you've got to go through some kind of a metamorphosis. And you've got to change from what you currently are, flesh and blood, this kind of stuff, skin and veins and muscle and tissue and sinew, into something Jesus characterized, the English word, called spirit. He likened it to the wind. It was invisible to the human eye, but you could see the effect of what it could do. And though it was indeed something different, nevertheless, Jesus said, Nicodemus, it's yours to have. That's right. You must be born again. Now, the Apostle Paul over here, interestingly enough, further elaborates on this idea of this born-again experience over in 1 Corinthians chapter 15. And it goes to this subject we're talking about regarding your destiny, my friends, my destiny, what you and I are truly created for, what we're all about, what God has created humankind for. And it's sad. It's unfortunate human beings don't grasp this vision. I think if they would, matter of fact, I don't think, I know that if we could, as a global species, understand why we were born and grasp the relationship we should have with God our Father and Jesus Christ, the Son of God, we would have and attach much more value to human life, and guaranteed have far less murder and wars throughout the world. But unfortunately, you know it as well as I do, there's so much confusion about the purpose of man that sadly and unfortunately, we just don't get it. As a creation, we just don't get it. And what am I talking about? I'm talking about this very point the Apostle Paul elaborates upon over here in 1 Corinthians and in chapter 15. And let me break into the context here in verse 12. Paul says this in writing to this Corinthian congregation in the city of Corinth a couple of thousand years ago. He says, now if Christ be preached, that he rose from the dead, how come some of you among you here say there's no resurrection? See, this goes to this fact of what Jesus talked to Nicodemus about with regard to the reality of this changing from one material to another. And so Paul says here, look, there is a raising of the dead. And dropping down real quickly, he says the fact that Jesus is raised from the dead. And over here in verse 14, he states that he is risen, and our preaching would be in vain if he wasn't, and your faith would also be in vain. But the fact of it is, he is risen, and he says here that Adam all die, even so Christ shall all be made alive, every man in his own order, Christ the firstfruits, after they that are Christ at his coming. And then comes the end when he shall have delivered up the kingdom to God, even the Father, when he shall have put down all rule and authority and power, and Christ being king on the earth. My friends, what Jesus is promising us is a resurrection. He goes through these details here in talking about a spirit body that you will bear the image of the heavenly. That's right. You will bear the image of the heavenly. You can read it there in verses roughly around 40 or so down through the end of the chapter, where he finally says, look, I want to show you a great mystery. And that mystery is very simply that you are going to be changed in the twinkling of an eye from mortal to immortal is ultimately your destiny. Can you believe that? I mean, I'll tell you, I get so pumped up when I start talking about this stuff because it is even better than the most outrageous sci-fi movie that you've ever seen. The sad part is, this kind of truth has never truly been shared in all of its glorious light, like it should be shared and understood in the clarity that it should be understood. And unfortunately, too many people are thinking that when they die, they just go to heaven, when in fact there's so much more to grasp when you realize that what Jesus is talking about is life hereafter as an immortal and as a literal born son of the very God family. So much to tell you, but time's run out on me. Let me offer this free offer to all of you, as we often do on these programs that we have on the internet after the Armor of God brand. Dial now, or not dial, but hit us on our website at cgi.org or email us, that is info@cgi.org. Ask for this booklet, it's free of charge, Man's Awesome Destiny. Man's Awesome Destiny. It's going to go into far more detail than I will be able to explain here in these little 10, 15-minute presentations. You've got to get this booklet. You will find it very educational, and I believe should be able to help you better connect the dots with why you were indeed created. My friends, this is Bill Watson again on the Armor of God on the net, asking you to keep in tune with us, and we'll see you hopefully right back here again for another session of the Armor of God on the internet.